because I do know accountants and bookkeepers, and some it can be a if they're independent, it can be a highly lonely profession. You have to invent, how do I do this?
You're listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with your host, Michael Palmer. Listen each week as inspiring guests share their secrets of success to help you increase your confidence, work smarter, and build a business you love. This episode of The Successful Bookkeeper is brought to you by PureBookkeeping.com, the proven system to grow your bookkeeping business.
Welcome back to the Successful Bookkeeper podcast. I am your host, Michael Palmer, and today's show is going to be a fantastic one. Our guest is the president of Leading Consciously, which helps individuals and organizations create resilient, sustainable, multicultural, and diverse settings. Jean Latting, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. I am totally delighted to be here.
It's wonderful to have you, and I'm excited to hear from you, and I was inspired by your website and what you've been up to. And so before we get into all of that, Jean, please tell us a little bit about your story, your career leading up to this point.
Okay. My story has been almost a straight trajectory, but I have veered off in weird places that I didn't know I was still on the same straight line. Bottom line, I'm a social worker, and I have been committed to helping people be the best that they can be. I started off my career as a community organizer, door knocking, welfare rights, tenants' rights, helping people feel that they could be powerful, even though they were poor, even though they were living in rat-infested buildings, all of that. I moved from that as I got my master's in social work in community organization. I moved into program management. When I was a community organizer, I thought the oppressors, I had the world very neatly divided into the oppressors and the oppressed. And the oppressors were the bureaucrats and the folks who were oppressing the poor people. Well, as I got my master's and started talking to the people inside organizations, I realized how oppressed they were. They wanted to do more. They wanted more for their lives, and the rules and regulations and sometimes the leadership did not allow them to flourish. And so I started, as I call it, I moved from the outside to the inside. And from that, then I moved into looking at the nature of leadership, what creates a great leader. And I expanded my definition of leader to include everybody in the organization who wants to influence something or someone to make things better. And I could do that because I had worked with poor people, and I had been responsible for leadership development. I had watched poor people who thought they could do nothing and that they were powerless. I watched them step into their own and meet with city heads and speak up on behalf of their communities. So I knew that anybody could be a leader if they got the training and the self-confidence to do so. So now I'm inside organizations and I'm working with people who say, well, I'm just here and it's up to the boss and I can't. And I'm not sure and all that. And it was a pleasure for me to watch them learn, people learn how to speak up for themselves and speak up for the changes they'd like to see in their organization and to commit to making things better. And so that's where I am now. Then from there, working with what's called individual contributors and supervisors, I moved up into working with higher level organizational leads and small businesses and nonprofits where the leadership team wants to do better, wants committed to their organization, have a vision of how wonderful things could be if only. And the work I do is helping them figure out how to get out of their own way so this wonderful vision they have for themselves, for the organization, for the people, so that could be realized.
Remarkable story. Your experience with helping the poor become empowered. And I love how that it sort of went up the level to, okay, the learning's there, the education then led you to, and seeing this really interesting perspective of really the oppressed, or they're right up the chain, and then unleashing their own power to be, in effect, leaders and to have change happen. I mean, when you're talking about that, I'm thinking of our listener, and not only in their own organization dealing with growing their business and making things happen, but what they see in the marketplace, the clients that they have, and empowering them in their own businesses and taking leadership roles. I mean, it's, if you think about it, leadership is so essential in every organization from the top to the bottom. If you have people that, like you say, that are committed to having something different or be into changing the organization, if you have people like that in your company who are standing up for the good of the company and the organization, I mean, it's remarkable things can happen.
Yes, it takes courage because people don't want to be fired, depending on where they are. People don't want to be fired. Or if you're a business owner, you might have an employee or a client or someone whom you think is, I'm going to use the word oppression still, who is oppressing others, oppressing themselves. You don't want to lose them as a client, yet the behavior is making everybody miserable. And so being able to speak to that is the challenge. And then if you throw diversity into it, you add the people are talking across race and ethnicity, across gender, across sexual orientation, and all of those differences in there. You throw that in the mix, then people want to stand up, but some people are literally terrified of making a mistake and alienating people so badly that they lose the business, they lose the client, they lose the employee, they get fired, whatever.
So true. And that, I mean, today it's a lot of change, a lot of, we hear about it every day in the news, that people can become paralyzed with fear, and so nothing happens.
Exactly.
Going back to the example of these people who were poor, living in rat-infested homes, and having them, march up the steps of the city hall, as I'm probably adding a little bit to it there, but going
Literally.
going and standing up for themselves and for their rights. What does it take to get someone to go from that to marching up the steps?
Community. There's a fascinating book that I just recently read called Change. And he talks in this book, he talks about literally what I'd learned about umpteen years ago in my graduate program, and what I saw when I was doing just that people turn to other people like themselves and said, is it okay if I do this? If you think about any problem you've had, you know who you call and who not to call for various problems. I remember sitting and saying, okay, I can call Joe for this and I can call Judy for that, but I can't call Judy for this other thing. I better get Joe. And all of those phone calls and checking in with people whom you think are knowledgeable and can help you, that gives the courage, knowing that what I'm thinking about has been approved by someone I trust and whom I think has something to offer. Then I say, okay, and they're telling me I can do this, and they will coach me through it. I can do this. And so the surprise, I still remember one guy who was from Puerto Rico, who did not speak fluent English, who emerged as the leader to his surprise and all of our surprise, because he was willing to say, my children mean more to me than my fear.
It's powerful.
My family means more to me than my fear. And these people, me and my colleagues, the other community organizers who were supporting this effort in this community, we were saying, this is what you can do. This is what not to do. This is how to talk. We cannot talk for you. The big hurdle was, no, we cannot talk to the city, the head of the department for you. We cannot do that. We can work with you and role play with you and help you. But this is your family, your community. We're outsiders. So you have to do it. And he stepped up and he did it.
It's a beautiful, beautiful story. And it's, the one I always think of is giving someone right out of the Bible, give someone fish or teach them how to fish.
Exactly.
And then the other layer with that is, look, we're in a community of fisher people, right? Or fishermen, but we'll try and bring a general neutral, people who fish, right? You're in a community of people who fish, and you're learning how to fish. That's the secret sauce to transforming anything with community, by the sounds of it, and with learning and courage. Anything can be accomplished.
Right. Exactly.
With our listener is so interesting, massive community of bookkeeping business owners, a successful bookkeeper, and as well in pure bookkeeping. And it's exactly what we hear back from our community members is the most valuable piece when asked of what we do. It's the community. And it's for the exact reasons, I believe, that you're laying out for us today. And that when you see others taking doubt and fear and uncertainty, but yet acting courageously and getting results, it's this combined effect that helps people grow. Together, we're stronger.
Yes, this is why when I found out about what you're doing, I was just fascinated, because I do know accountants and bookkeepers, and some, it can be a if they're independent, it can be a highly lonely profession. You have to invent, how do I do this? And dealing with the public, the people who are calling you for you to come help them can be the very ones who get in their own way. And so how do you, if what I'm doing is numbers, how do I tell this person that their behavior is what's killing their business?
So many layers to that, and that is where there's so much opportunity in the industry and in this community and for bookkeepers, is that increase in leadership because of that exact reason. There needs to be change, and yet often there's this. Many of our listeners will likely appreciate this. It's like the business owner almost has more authority, and because bookkeepers for whatever reason, it's believed that it's like, well, they're just a person that works and puts all the numbers together, and it's like, what do they know, right?
Right.
And yet it's not the truth. The truth is that the bookkeeper has some of the most important information and knowledge about the financial condition of the business that they're working with. They have experiences. If you get a great bookkeeper, they have experiences working with multiple businesses for years and understand, where all the challenges are and the consequences of behaviors. And yet many don't share that knowledge or challenge the thinking of business owners because of the stigma that's made up in people's minds. And so just like the people in the rat-infested building, it's like, well, what can we do? We can't go up those big, tall steps and talk to these big, highfalutin people and stand up for ourselves. We can't do that. But when you bring community together and you actually have people take the steps to actually get to the steps and climb up the steps, they absolutely can be the leader. And what ends up happening is it's a life transfer. I would love to hear some stories about when people take that, when it's like, this is a wall, this is a barrier, and I can't cross that barrier. It's too hard, it's too difficult. But when they do, the walls start coming down.
Yeah. We teach, what the work we do is we literally teach people what works and what doesn't work and how to approach someone. So if you have someone, let's say you're a bookkeeper and you're looking at the numbers and you know that the numbers don't add up, and then you look at the client and he's going around barking at people and telling people that they just need to not think and do what he says, which means that nobody's going to tell him the numbers are off, or that so-and-so is cheating, ciphering off stuff, or that the reason he keeps losing employees is because of his attitude and his treatment. And so the question is, if I'm just a bookkeeper, if I define myself as, quote, just a bookkeeper, who am I to tell him how to run his business? So in that scenario, it really is the exact same as marching up the steps to City Hall. I have a perspective, and the question is, do you want to hear it? And that question alone will get attention most of the time. If you start off telling them your perspective, they'll shut you down because you're bringing bad news. But if you say, I've been handling your books for a while, I've been observing, and I have observed some things. Do you want to hear it?
Profound.
That's called getting permission. If you get permission first, then you have that person's attention. And it works with a spouse. It works with a partner. It works with a child. Anybody who's raised a teenager knows how hard that is. I've listened to you. I still remember my daughter was 13. I'm listening to her on the phone with her friends. And I'm thinking, okay, what do I do about this? And so I said to her, I've been listening to your phone conversation and I have some thoughts about what's going on. Do you want to hear it? And of course, it took her about an hour to say yes, because I just went off and did something else. But eventually she came and said, what? And then that was the beginning of our conversation. So you got to first get them in the mindset of being willing to listen before you start talking and telling them how wrong they are.
It's powerful. What happens when they don't want to listen?
Yes. If they say, no, I don't want to listen, you say, fine. And then you come check, you figure out your time and how long before I come back. Do I want to wake up? There's in negotiation, the first no is a reaction, not a position. So do you want to listen? No, I don't want to listen to you. You just do what you're supposed to do. That's the reaction. That's not a position. So now that you go away, like I did, I went off and washed dishes or whatever. So you go away, say, that's fine, your choice, and just go away. And it's going to sit on their brain that you have information that they could use, potentially use. And sometimes a week they might come back. If not, give it a week, a month, whatever you want, whatever it takes. And then something else will happen again. Whatever it was that prompted you to say that the first time, the same situation will pop up again. You say, I see. You remember I asked you if you wanted to hear what I had to say? I'm observing more signs that there's something going on that I think merits your attention. Do you want to hear my thoughts about it? So now this is round 2. And what I have found is you go as many rounds as it takes the person before they break down and hear you. Now, so let's think about Coca-Cola or Kleenex tissues or Tesla. They hammer you with ads over and over and over and over again. You don't hear an ad and say, oh, I think I'll go buy this. They keep hammering you with these ads. And then eventually you break down and say, I think I'll try that cereal. I think I'll go test drive that car. And so you, as an internal change person or external change person, it's the same principle. The first time they hear you, it's completely weird, out of the box thought. Come back a week, a month later and say, I keep noticing things that disturb me. Do you want to hear it? And eventually they're going to say yes. So this is a matter of how persistent you want to be. We're a very short-sighted, short attention span society. I asked him and he said no, so he can just suffer. He can just, his business can rot for all I care. Well, that's just because his first no was a reaction, not a position. He's got this whole idea that you have something of value to offer other than tabulating numbers. That's going to take him a while to absorb that as a new thought. So give him that time and space and come back periodically and check. And eventually it could take, okay, when I coach people, I have a very special people who are having a boss or a coworker that they just can't stand, can't get along with. He'll never act right. He hates me. He's prejudiced. She's hates women. I'll never get it. I say, if you do this, give it 6 months. I remember one client, I said, the situation you're describing is dire. I can lay out a plan for you, but it's going to take you 6 months. It'll take you 3 months before you'll see evidence of any kind of change. And it'll take 6 months before you'll know there's a change. But you will have to stick to the program, what I tell you. And if you break it and get impatient and start telling the person how sorry they are, if you break this, then you're starting again from ground zero, and it'll take another 6 months. I'm giving you a 6-month plan, but you have to stick with it for the whole 6 months. He said, okay. 3 months to the day, he called me and said, guess who called me on the phone? I said, who? And he gave the name. And then he said, do you realize that 3 months ago you told me I was on a 6-month plan? And that 3 months I would see a sign. I just got the sign. And 6 months later, literally it was 6 months. It was amazing. 6 months, he said, guess who invited me out to lunch?
Wow.
The point I'm making is we don't do what needs to be done or could be done because we approach the person. They say no. We take it as a rejection, put our tail between our legs, sit down and feel miserable or lay them out silently in our minds. We don't have a plan to move forward slowly according to this person's capacity to embrace the change. And that's what it takes.
It's remarkable, and brings up, I'm here thinking of Guns N' Roses, the band. All I need is a little patience.
Yes,
is a good song from my generation, but a remarkable lesson that's coming out in this conversation is that if we bring a little bit of patience to our communication, the remarkable things can happen. And we're very we're impatient. We're busy, as you said. We're busy. It's we're fast moving, impatient people. Well, we get the results of being impatient is often not very good.
Exactly.
And what's possible when we bring the patience is that we can, think about the fulfillment that person would have had by being patient for 6 months. The view and outlook not only on themselves, but also on the view of what they see the world as and human beings as has transformed.
Yes.
With a little patience. And I would break into song if I could sing, but
Well, I will just say that patience is more than a notion if you think somebody hates you and you're interacting with them every day. Holding fast to the possibility of transforming that relationship for 6 months is more than a notion.
Mm.
But I've seen it work time and time and time again. And it means not returning fire with fire.
And that's difficult for many, to not return fire with fire. How, maybe using the same example, because I myself know, and in my journey through life, reaction is what many of us do every day, is react. And sometimes when fire comes, it brings the fire because we're reacting and we're not patient. What advice do you give, or how can people build up the willpower or stamina or muscle of not bringing fire to fire?
Yeah, we're back to community. I ask people, what's your support network? Because you're only talking with me maybe once a week for an hour or 2 hours. So this is not, just talking to me is not going to be enough to sustain you. What's your spiritual background? Do you pray? Do you meditate? What do you do to ground yourself when you're upset? Where do you go? Who can you call at not 3 a.m. at midnight? Who can you call when you're so frustrated? Do you journal? Can you write out? Can you write out all the hateful things you want to say to the person and send me that email? Don't send it to the person. Send it to me. I know that this is just discharge. It's fine. Just let it out. Don't stuff all of that emotion. Let it out. So I just explore with them what kind of community support can they get? Who can they partner with, accountability partner, to hold their feet to the fire, so that when they want to lay out so-and-so, that instead they say, I can't lay them out. I'm 2 months into my 6-month plan, and so I have to stay the course, even though they're acting like a total 100% jerk. I'm staying the course. So who can help you stay the course until you start to see the results?
Very
And
good.
people who've had children or nieces and nephews, they understand that. They've watched the person. I remind them, you did not expect your 6-month-old to tie their shoes. You just tied their shoes day after day after day after day after day. You did that because you knew they were not capable of tying their shoes. And then when they were 3, trying to tie their shoes, you're late. You sat there impatiently waiting for them to tie their bloody shoes, which took them 5 minutes. You waited. You know how to be patient. You have that skill. You just have to let go of the thought, this person should know better. It's the thought, this person should know better, that makes us impatient.
Hmm. And another piece that you mentioned earlier was the example of the person realizing that the children, their own children, and what they were standing for in their own life was far more important than whatever was in their way at
Yes.
that time.
Yes.
You do a lot of work with multicultural settings and multicultural work. Tell us a little bit about why this is important to you and why it's important to our listener to be thinking about.
Sure. I grew up in the segregated South. So, to be very straightforward, I grew up with mean white people around me, outside of our neighborhood, when I go downtown, all of that. Fast forward, and I now go to an integrated school. And there were some whites who I discovered were very nice. They were nice people. This was a big shock for me. And there were some whites who were still mean. Fast forward, I'm now in college, no, I'll go into graduate school. I'm now doing community organizing, and I'm seeing the same phenomenon. I'm in New York City now, and it's a much more subtle thing. So there are those literally who have a vision of a society in which me and people like me belong. And there are those who have a vision of people where people like me do not belong. What I came to discover was some of the people who thought that I did not belong in their world were wonderful people. They were kind people. They would rescue me if I were in danger. They would give me things, but they were raised to believe that I did not belong in their society. So it was like I could almost see the tension and the conflict. On the one hand, their genuine human impulse to be kind and decent to all people was there. On the other hand, they were programmed, a friend of mine calls it malware. They were programmed with malware that they've been programmed with and they don't know how to get rid of. So fast forward some more, and now the Black people I'm doing diversity work in organizations. And I still remember going to one organization and we said we're doing the diversity and inclusion work. And the three white men stood up and said, "Oh, we don't have those problems here." And the three Black people in the room are looking at me with pleading eyes. You know, I could see them saying, "Please don't let him please don't buy in." But they could say nothing. They didn't want to get fired. So through all of these experiences, what I learned was that the white men, white people who thought there were no problems, no such problems, and they knew there were no such problems because their best friend's cousin comes to their cousin's best friend comes to their house for dinner. That person is Black, and so they know they don't have any problems because they know they are nice to Black people. Those people do not know what they don't know. And the Black people in the organization don't know how to speak up and talk about their experiences. So I had to learn how to work on both ends and to make it safe for people to listen to each other and to talk about their experiences. What I have found, and post George Floyd, I wrote in my blog about it and others wrote about it. I was shocked to find out how many of my white friends did not know things that I took for granted about what it means to be Black in this country. And they were shocked to learn it. I also discovered how silent I was. Why didn't they know? Because I hadn't told them. Why hadn't I told them? Because I did not want to ruin the friendship. So now take that and put it in the workplace. And what you see is it's now what's happening in the workplace now is white women mentoring white women and Black women in that same organization and Black men not getting the opportunities. People mentor people like themselves. And so the white women, because they're thinking, "Oh, good, we've conquered the patriarchy," they're accepting their leadership roles, but who they choose to mentor and bring along are people who look like them. So the cycle gets perpetuated. The challenge then is to help them understand what they're doing and to help the people of color to speak up.
So there's a lot of fear because, everything that we've talked about this entire conversation leads up to this point when it comes to multicultural is the white women are mentoring the white women. They've broken down some barriers for themselves. However, they're not mentoring Black women. And I would imagine a big piece of that is it's very fearful. It's not what they know. It's not part of they don't know what they don't know. And to go where they don't know, it's like, what would they say? What would they how would they mentor? What if they said the wrong thing? So there's this fear that creates a barrier and prevents there from being development and improvement. But what happens when we break that down and we have people in our organization, white women, being courageous and saying, no, I'm going to mentor Black women and white women? What happens?
Yeah, and that's it's glorious. When it happens, it's glorious. And it's happening. It's slowly happening. People I can't tell you how many white people have said, I want to do better. I had no idea what I was doing. I want to be better. I want to do better. I didn't know what I didn't know. And so when it happens and they open the doors, then what happens is the organization itself opens up. The business does better. And this is the thing that's the hardest for people to understand. When you unleash the full creativity of everybody, the organization, the business does better. If some people are sitting there suppressed, it's easier to understand it with gays and lesbians. People who are in the closet, what I have found is gays and lesbians in the closet, and fewer are in the closet now than before. But when they're in the closet, they're constantly monitoring themselves. I can't talk about what happened, what I did over the weekend. I can't put a picture up. If I go into the meeting, I have to, people think I'm straight. I have to be straight appearing. I have to walk a certain way. I have to monitor what I'm doing. All of that is consuming brain power and energy and distracting from that person being fully themselves. When people say, oh, I can joke and talk about race. Oh, I can talk about my family. Oh, I can say that what you said offended me. When I can do that, a huge burden is lifted off of me. And I can be free to be creative and innovative and take risks.
Beautiful freedom. Beautiful freedom. Well, it's so interesting to hear you and your perspective, and there's so many angles that we've covered in this conversation around our own view of the world, where we are, where we're trying to get to, and some key things that we've talked about are being courageous, being patient, giving things time, not reacting, and bring this to our own business. And when we do that, freedoms come, freedom of energy, and I just absolutely love the thinking about that energy that's being burnt on worrying about what will happen, or what if, now turns into a completely different, direct that energy into making the workplace thrive and the business thrive, which is great for everyone that's involved. Jean, this has been absolutely fabulous. Please tell us a little bit about where our listener can learn more about you and your organization, Leading Consciously.
Sure. Thank you. www.leadingconsciously.com. That's leading, like leadership, leading, Leading, consciously. It's called Leading Consciously because everything we've talked about requires being conscious of what you're doing rather than operating in the default mode, continuing to do what you've always done. So leadingconsciously.com. If we have a Pathfinders program, membership program that's very exciting and having benefits beyond what I had imagined. People read the blog posts and come together and talk about it and then apply that to their lives. And as a result, people are changing their organizations. It's not a one-to-one in that I'm reading about exactly what to do and then I apply it. I could be reading about someone in India, but human beings being human beings everywhere, what I've learned from talking about that, I can now take it into my life and change how I approach things. And so that's what I'm finding is happening. People are gaining courage as they understand more.
Remarkable. We will have the links to your program, to your organization in our show notes. And Jean, I want to say thank you on behalf of our listeners, on behalf of everyone I know, quite frankly. I want to thank you for dedicating your life to making the world a better place, your community a better place, empowering people to make their own world and their own community a better place. It's people like you that give me hope, that give me inspiration to keep doing the work that I do. And I'm sure you've done that for our listener today. So thank you.
Thank you. And I truly appreciate being here. I love the questions you ask. And I'm just imagining, I know people out there are just struggling with their lives. And I hope it's been useful.
I know it will be useful. And so thank you very much. And with that, we wrap another episode of the Successful Bookkeeper podcast. To learn more about today's wonderful guest and to get access to all sorts of valuable free business building resources, you can go to thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Until next time, goodbye.
You've been listening to The Successful Bookkeeper with Michael Palmer. For more information and to download the resources mentioned in this episode, please visit us at thesuccessfulbookkeeper.com. Thank you for listening.